Hey, welcome back to another episode of Poor Man's Bonsai. Today I'm going to be repotting these elephant bush succulents that I featured in a previous video, so stick around. I've been needing to do this for a while with these plants. They've all been in these pots for years. So I'm going to be repotting this guy in this cool little gray pot. This one right here in this deeper white pot, because I want to give it some more room for the roots to grow so that it can start getting some more foliage. And then this one, I'm really liking how it's turning out so far. I'm going to be repotting it in this blue pot. So let's get to it. Alright, this first one here I'm going to repot has been featured in some other videos in the past. And this poor little one has been in this pot for a very long time. So I've really felt the need to repot it, especially recently, because the leaves have like really slowed down in their growth, and it's just looking real scraggly, and it's super root bound, and so it's just time. And so I'm just gonna pull it right out because it is not tight in there at all. Immediately I could see it's just completely root bound, and so I think this plant will be very happy with some repotting and some trimming, some root trimming. So I'm gonna just start breaking up the roots here. I'm not putting it into a bigger pot, but I think with some root pruning and some just better soil, newer and better soil, and I'm going to be trimming the plants too, the leaves and stuff. I think it'll be much happier than it was. So I'm going to take my hook here and just start loosening up some of this. I think that ideally repotting this in the spring would probably be best, but I've had good success repotting these every time of the year, and especially because where I live has very mild winters, I'm not too worried about it. I've never, I shouldn't say never, I've very rarely had issues repotting these fellas at any time of the year. So I'm just going to start by raking out the roots, and you can see it has very good roots, even despite the bad need of repotting. But yeah, nice and strong roots. And this is that plant that began as a branch that I broke off of a bush that was at a garage sale, the Everything Must Go garage sale. And yeah, the lady running the sale was totally fine with me taking a cutting off of her big elephant bush that she had. So I'm gonna set this down and just get some of these roots that I've raked out off the table. Push that rest of that out, and I'm gonna go get my clippers. I'm gonna trim up these roots just a little bit. Alright, I'm back with my clippers. Sorry if you can hear my washing machine going in the background. It's quite noisy right now. But yeah, what I'm doing is I'm just cleaning up the roots. This will give it nice room to grow in the new pot. And one of the things I'm going to look for too right now is any real nice looking roots that are going to add some character that I could sort of feature. It's because it's been so long since I've repotted this, I haven't had a good look at what some of these roots look like. So I'm going to just clear away some of the excess surface roots so that I could see some of the bigger ones that really give the tree character, and see if I could pinpoint those and trim away others that are going to prevent those from being seen. So I know it looks pretty excessive what I'm cutting off, but I'm not super worried because this is a succulent. I think it'll be fine with the repotting. So alright, so I'm happy with that. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 real thick roots that will be featured, and when I pot it right now, I'll make sure those are seen so that those can be a feature of the trunk. And what I'm going to do right now is moisten the roots before I continue on with the repotting. Alright, so I'm back here with the tree with the moistened roots. I've got my pot here with the wire ready to go with the screen in place. So now I'm going to start getting my first layer of soil in there. And what I'm using is the same stuff I've been using now this summer. And it's about 1/3 pumice, 1/3 perlite, and 1/3 orchid bark. So you can see sort of the different colors of the stuff in there. But seems to be working well so far with the plants that I've planted in it. So I'm going to keep continuing to use it. So what I'm going to do is plant my initial layer, put my initial layer of soil, so that the rest of what I do, or so that it really elevates the plant. So the rest of what I do is just pouring the soil in and around the roots rather than having to pour soil under it once I like where the plant is placed. So kind of create that initial layer, because what I want is I want those roots exposed out of the pot so that they're really featured, just because they look really cool. And I'll get some close-up shots after I've put this guy in place. So but what I'm going to do is just sort of figure out where in the pot I want it placed. I don't want it like that. That looks dorky if it's all hanging out over here and there's all this space over here. So I want to set it off, slightly off center. So I'm going to go to my right here. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to clear a little bit of space so it can sit a little bit lower. So move some of the soil off to the left here. And I think that looks good. So the first thing I'm going to do is wire the tree into place. So get my 2 pieces of wire and start twisting. And this wire is pretty flexible, so I'm not going to need pliers to get it in place, but sometimes you might need some pliers to help you get a really good grip on the wire. So I think that looks really good. And once I get the soil in there and watered, it should help hold it in place a little bit better. But what I'm going to do too is tuck the wire down a bit so that it's not seen once I get the soil on. And then over time the roots will spread and really hold itself in. But yeah, so like you see it from this angle, I think it looks really good. So now let's get the rest of our soil poured in here. And I'll put the rest of the soil that falls out back in my container so I'm not wasting it. But yeah, do a little bit of pounding on the pot here, get the soil in place, grab my piece of bamboo, right here, and start really pushing it in between all the roots. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is water it and then trim it a bit, and yeah, we'll continue on with our repotting process. Alright, so the tree is nice and watered. I water it several times to really allow the water to penetrate and permeate all the soil and the roots. So now I'm on top of this cool little Lazy Susan that my wife picked up at a thrift store for me, and I'm just going to trim this plant a little bit. As I was saying earlier, I've noticed this plant's gotten really scraggly and really the growth has greatly decreased, and some of the leaves are getting shriveled, and I think it's just desperately needed to be repotted for a while now. So I believe it'll start growing a lot more now that there's more room for growth. The soil isn't as compacted. It'll allow more aeration into the roots. So I think it'll do a lot better. But right now I'm going to do an initial trimming. And so I'm just going to start easy. I'm going to start by cutting back all the sort of newer growth so that it will split off where I'm cutting. So these plants do really well with trimming, because often when you trim it, it'll split into 2 branches from where you cut it. So And because the growth hasn't been amazing, it's I'm not really going to do that much trimming, but my hope is that it'll really come back soon. So, and I think it will. I think it just needed some TLC. So, cut this off here. Cut off some of the random little branches that are growing in on the trunk. I don't want to allow too many of those to grow because I'd rather it use its energy on other parts. So yeah, it's gotten real thin, but I'm hoping that it'll come back. Do a little bit more trimming on the roots. I'm going to trim off some of these old scars that were there from when I had cut previous branches off. Just clean those up a bit. All right, so I think that's pretty good for this plant. I think we can call it good, and let's move on to the next plant. All right, so here's the second elephant bush that we're going to repot today. And as I was saying earlier, I'm going to repot it in a deeper pot. It's doesn't have as wide of a surface area or circumference, but it's a deeper pot, and I just wanted to allow this thing to have a lot of room for growth in the upcoming months, because I really want some of these branches to develop quicker, so I don't want to put it into such a small pot right away. And if you remember from a few videos back, this is the one that I really cleaned up this really cool sort of knot hole in it, and I think it's going to develop into a really cool feature as this tree grows. All right, so let's get this plant out of the pot. So I'm just going to pull it straight out. I already undid the wire, so all right, so you can check out those roots. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good root system that it's gotten going. And yeah, the soil had gotten pretty broken down, but wasn't terrible. Wasn't completely tight in there, but I'm going to set the pot aside and set the other pot aside too, and start raking out these roots here. So grab the root hook. And just like the other one, this one has been in that pot for a very long time. So this is also desperately needed to be repotted. And I did do some cool root work on this when I trimmed this plant last month or so, but this allows me to see even better how the roots are looking. So take this, cut that excess one off. I'm actually not going to trim too much because it doesn't have a whole lot of real long roots, so I'm gonna take these and get them wet real quick and see how it looks in the pot already, because yeah, it doesn't have too many long roots in there. So I'll be right back. All right, I'm back here with the pot and the plant. Got the roots wet. Ended up just reusing the wire from the old pot, very poor man's bonsai style, and it's just a great way to be resourceful. So often we might think, okay, we got to put all new stuff when you repot a plant, but no, you can just reuse things, and sometimes too you can even just repot a plant into the same pot. There's nothing wrong with that too. Sometimes you just need to repot because the roots need to be pruned or you need new soil, but in this case I wanted to put it in a new pot just to change things up. So as you can see, I don't really want to trim any more roots because looks like you'll have plenty of room for the roots to grow. And because of the height of the pot, the roots will want to grow down because there's not too much more room to the sides where they can grow. So I'm going to start by getting my soil all loaded up in there. Make it quicker just by dumping it in. Okay. And just like the last one, I want to really allow those cool roots to be featured. So I'm going to, I think that's pretty good like that. So, and same thing, I'm not going to put it, certainly don't want to put it off to the side if we're free to out of the plant this way. I don't want to put it over here to where all the foliage is going to hang off the plant this way. I want to allow some cool space here so that the branches kind of come over the top, so this direction. So let's do that like that. Let's get our wire here, and yeah, just sort of wire it in place. I'm kind of wiring off to the side because I don't want to have this big ugly wire hanging out over the top of these really cool roots. So if I can get it to stay nice and pinned even off to the side, I'll be happy. And it's a little bit loose, but I think it'll be okay. And I can even place a rock or two to set it in, but we twist it a little bit more too to get it a little tighter. Yeah, I think it'll be good. So right now we have the look like that, or if we're looking at it this way, it's like that. So yeah, let's fill in the rest with the rest of the soil. Get our bamboo stick. Start pushing it down in between all the roots. Some of our extra soil, place it on top, back on top. Hide the wire off to the side. I'll probably end up trimming it a bit, but yeah, the plant looks like it's nice and stable in there. Do a little bit more of the pushing it between the roots, and all right, so let's water it and just trim it up a bit. Be right back. All right, so we're back. Got the tree watered. It's looking good. We're on our little lazy Susan here. And I'm going to just do some trimming. And so it's a good opportunity when you repot to sort of look at the structure of your plant. At least this is what I do. I take it as an opportunity to really look at it and decide, am I liking how it's going, liking the direction that the branches are growing. And so as I'm looking at it, it's still hard to really see a nice defined look to how the plant is going to turn out. But I think I've decided I'm actually going to do a pretty big cut right here and then trim off some of these, because I would love for, rather than this being way out here and this being way out here, I'd love for it to be closer together and work with this branch and this branch to have these two here start really tightening up so that this becomes sort of this main trunk right up to the main pad of foliage. And so I think having this excess stuff out here and here is going to end up not being super helpful for that. So I'm going to do a couple big extreme cuts, including one there, and I could repot that and start another little bonsai, and then cut some of these branches back, so in the hopes that they really start splitting and the ramification takes off. Let's cut that there. Same thing as the last plant. I'm going to cut so that they start splitting off where I'm cutting. I'm actually going to reduce that a bit. And this one is sort of out of place right now, I think, but I'm going to leave it for now. But the idea is, hopefully over time, these really take off, so that as you're looking at the pot, if you're looking at it from this direction, you see this fat trunk coming up here, and then it sort of takes a turn here, and then you've got this pad of foliage right here. So, and hopefully with it being in a new pot, the growth will start to quicken, and we could see that developing quicker. So, all right, I think that one's good for now. Let's move on to the third one. All right, so this last plant here has had my favorite development this year so far. And as you can see, it's just really starting to take on that tree look. It's taking to pruning really well. I can look and find all the spots where I've been trimming it and seeing that the branches are splitting off from there, and it's doing awesome. But still want to repot this one, and I think it will look much cooler in sort of a more traditional looking bonsai pot. So let's take our little owl friend out for a second, put him back in, and yeah, let's pull it out, see how the roots are looking, and get to root pruning. And immediately I could see that the roots are doing super well. In fact, they grew right through this screen that I used, which that's great. You want to see nice and healthy roots developing when you go to repot. Sadly, many times I've gone to repot a tree, and when I pull the tree out of the soil, I feel like, are there even any roots there? And oftentimes those trees end up not making it. Probably a mixture of bad soil on my part, or I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of different things that cause that, but this is nice to see that it's got some really healthy roots going on. So much so I got to really cut off a lot of that screen. So all right, so I'm just going to trim this a bit. Same thing as the last one. I'm not going to do very much trimming because I want to leave some good roots on there, but I'm going to leave that like that. I'm not going to do much else because I ended up having to cut kind of a decent amount off to get the screen off. So I'm going to go get the roots wet, and then I'll be back. All right, so I'm back here with the tree with the roots moistened. I got the pot ready to go with the wire. So yeah, let's do what we did in the last two and load a first layer of soil into the pot. I'm super excited. So this tree in the old pot had quite a bit of the trunk buried underground, so it's really fun seeing it now with some of the roots exposed, because it looks so much more it looks so much cooler, like so much more like a tree. It's got some more height on the trunk. No real good looking roots to find yet, so my hope is yeah, as I maybe allow the trunk to come out of the soil a little bit more, we'll start seeing some of those roots take shape and thicken up. And so yeah, so this one definitely is going to need wiring because it doesn't have very big roots to really hold it in place. So I'm probably going to add another layer here. I think that looks pretty good. So let's take our wire here and start twisting it in place. And I think on this one I will get some pliers to help get the tree a little bit tighter. So I will be right back. Alright, so I got some needle nose pliers here. That way we can get some really good cranks on the wire. And this one I probably will use some rocks to hold it in place, because even with the wire, the roots just aren't thick enough to really support it right now. Because what I've found is roots, when they get thick, when you're going to repot it, they almost act as opposite branches going down. They're nice and strong, and they create a good framework for the tree to sit on. Whereas this one, all the roots are pretty, some of them are starting to thicken up, but they're still pretty loose, or pretty flimsy and loose. So start pushing the soil down. Often too, after you water, that'll help the tree stabilize better too, because the water can sometimes act as a glue to get the soil to firm up a bit. Yeah, I am going to take a rock. In fact, for the time being, no, a little too big. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to water this, and then in the meantime, while I'm watering it, I'm going to find a rock to place right here to help support it and keep the tree upright, nice and strong. So we'll be right back. All right, so we're back. I found, it's not the perfect rock, but I found a pretty cool rock that's sort of acting as a wedge, just keeping the tree really upright in the perfect sort of angle. So the tree's sort of leaning on it, but it's also wired in, so I don't believe it's going to go anywhere unless, like, in the middle of the night, a cat or something knocks it over, which has definitely happened before, or a raccoon. But yeah, I'm really liking how it's turned out. So now what I'm going to do is what I did with the other two plants, and just give this plant a quick trimming. So let's start again at all the places where there's new growth and we want the branches to really split off. So I'm going to do that. And yeah, these are such fun plants. I've mentioned it in other videos, but they're really fun for wanting to grow something that makes really quick progress, because you can do a good trimming on this, and within a month or two, and sometimes sooner, it needs to be trimmed again, and there's so much to work with already, so much new growth, which makes it really fun, because it becomes very easy to get impatient in this hobby, as I've found, and I'm sure you've found. But when the plants grow fast, keeps things fun, keeps things interesting. So it's actually a branch that I've been thinking about cutting off for a while, and I'll let you see it. It's this one right here. It's sort of growing in this spot between two bigger branches, and I just think I could develop some of these other branches to take its place, and I don't think by cutting this we'll lose any of the character of the tree. So I think today is the day. I think I'm going to do it. So I'm going to get my cutter way in here and clip it off just like that. So once again, we could take that and cut it, and oops, tree's falling over a bit. Actually gonna, here we go. So you can see I lost that branch coming down here, but that's okay, because now what I could do is I could take this branch and develop it down, or take this branch and develop down. I think as a couple of these branches really start thickening up, we're not going to miss that branch that was there, because the foliage that happens down here on these branches will take its place. So yeah, I might want to do a second wire over the top now that I'm looking at the plant, because it is still pretty loose, but I think that looks pretty stinking cool. So there we go. We have our third repotted elephant bush. So let's do some close-ups and call it a day.